If it's September, it must be football season. Dave Kane, Jim Ruppert. Dave, give us a spotlight player from last week, week one of the high school football season. Who was in the spotlight last week?
Yeah, among small area schools, I would say Dan Rentschler, who's a junior running back over at Niantic Sangamon Valley. He gained 214 yards against Nokomis, scored a couple touchdowns. Nokomis actually led Sangamon Valley 14-0 at halftime. I think Mr. Rentschler took charge second half. He's over 2,300 for his career. He's only a junior. He's a wonderful athlete. He was a state qualifying high jumper as well. Sangamon Valley, for a small school, has a lot of good athletes. So he's one of the really top running backs in the area. Sangamon Valley will go up to Petersburg Porta Friday night. Porta, of course, is
licking some wounds there. Petersburg.
Yeah, exactly. They're trying to make some amends. They lost to Kincaid last week. This is the Sangamo Conference opener for everybody this week, the first week of conference games. So Porta will have to try to figure out a way to kind of contain Mr. Rentschler, I would say.
Talk about some other spotlight games this week, some games that people need to go out and watch.
Well, I would say, one of them, it has a lot of tradition to it and a lot of history. It's only week 2, but Greenfield plays at Jacksonville Route Friday night. Of course, it's at Kraushaar Rosenberger Field. That's where Route plays their home games.
Route cracked the top 10 in 1A this week.
Yeah, they did.
Greenfield's knocking on the door.
Yeah, exactly. The WIVC traditionally has 2 or 3 or sometimes 4 teams that are all in there in the 1A mix. Greenfield, it's going to be interesting to see. Both teams won kind of in blowout fashion last week. There were a lot of blowout games at the WIVC last week. But Greenfield has, Dan Bowman's been there forever, and, you always thought they were going to be nothing but a running team, but they've developed a nice balance. Michael Bishop is their quarterback. He has a host of very good receivers, but they still have some old-fashioned stuff to throw at you. They have a kid named Jake Sexton, who's about a 240-pound fullback. So
that's Dan Bowman football.
Yeah, exactly. And, of course, Jacksonville Route coming off they had an exciting postseason run last year. They made it to the semifinals. They have Tyler Schmidt, who's the senior quarterback this year. He split time last year. He's the guy this year. They have Michael Tonry, who was one of the top rushers back from last year, 1,500 yards last year. But, again, they won a blowout game against West Central last week. So it's going to be interesting to see, who's more dominant. But there's a lot of history to that game. Dan Bowman started his career coaching career at Route back in the 70s. So it's always interesting for him to come back there.
What's our big Sangamo game this week? Porta and Niantic.
Well, yeah, we have Porta and Niantic. New Berlin and Auburn, I think, will be interesting. I think Auburn's definitely a favorite in the game. Again, Auburn won a blowout game against Bunker Hill last week, so we know Auburn's good, but how good are they? New Berlin won I don't know if you would call it an upset last week. They beat North Mac. North Mac had 8 turnovers in that game. And obviously New Berlin made the most of a couple of opportunities. New Berlin, they get kind of fired up to play Auburn. Auburn has a lot of rivals, but New Berlin really gets fired up for them. So, it'll be interesting to see New Berlin kind of coming off I don't know if you'd call it an upset, but coming off a big win and seeing how Auburn reacts after having kind of a blowout game last week where their starters only played maybe one half.
What did we learn from last week? What lessons are, what things we went in thinking, and what do we change our mind about?
Well, I don't know about changing our mind. Again, we joked earlier that, as far as North Mac goes, it's a new program, a consolidation. It's a cliche, but they learned they're going to have to hang on to the football better than they did last week.
8 turnovers.
Yeah, 8 turnovers, and they outgained New Berlin and everything. So, obviously, just taking care of the football for North Mac. I still think there's a lot of potential there. They have a lot of numbers, a lot of depth. There were so many things we haven't learned yet, though, because there were so many blowouts. How good is Auburn? I think we learned that Williamsville is very good. I still don't know if they're quite as good as they were last year, but with a Josh Gentile, who's an exceptional athlete, he can score from just about any place at any time.
By the same token, we learned that Borgini Dobrino combination down at Gillespie is going to be something to deal with too.
It is, and I think Dobrino's a very good line coach, if nothing else, and they're going to be heard from in the Prairie State, absolutely.
All right, we'll be back next week to talk about what happened in Week 2 in area high school football.